Hey everyone, welcome back to C for Fun. It's the most wonderful time today. Today we're getting festive with code and printing a Christmas tree using C programming. Building on our previous videos on shapes, we'll apply those skills to create a fun and festive tree. Let's get started and make some magic happen. So before that, I would like to show you how to print this simple pattern. So this pattern is just a square, and to do that we just need two loops, one that will print our rows and one that will print our number of stars as seen in the previous videos. But the only difference here is that the number of stars is the same as the number of rows, or is the same as the size, which is 5. So let's do this. So we're going to need our two variables. We're going to need our size, which is 5, and then here let's go straight to the loops. So we have I equals to 1 so long as I is less than equals to the size, incrementing I, and then we're going to print our next line so that our stars come out line by line. And then printing the stars, we have j equals to 1 so long as j is less than equals to our size again, since it is square, incrementing j, and then printing our star and a little space so that it should come out clear. So this is our code. Let's run this and see what we get. Yeah, so this is our square pattern. Now let's get to the next part of the video, talking about adjusting the square pattern. Adjusting the square pattern here simply means either skewing the square to the right or skewing the square to the left. There are various modifications we can do on a square, but in this video we are going to be looking at this particular one. You can go on and try doing other modifications. I would like to see that in the comment section. So to do this modification, the only difference is these leading spaces that we have, which still vary according to our formula that we have always been using, the n minus I formula. Notice here that the number of stars too are still the same as the size or the number of rows, which is 5. Notice that. So now, since we already have our square pattern, this code for it, what we're going to do is we're just simply going to insert the number of leading spaces. So here I'll have a variable to hold space, and in the loop I'll have my space so as from space equals to 1 to space less than equals to n minus I, incrementing our space. Yeah, so there we have our leading spaces. Now let's run this and see what we get. So guys, that's our skewed square to the right precisely. You can go on and do the skewed square to the left. It's so important. Please don't forget to do that exercise. Now let's get to printing our Christmas tree, the video of the day. Before that, we're going to see a simpler way of printing a triangle. This is very important, because if I move to the tree, you see that we'll have these triangles at the top, which are stacked on top of one another. We would like to use this method, not the other method, because it's more complex. So printing this triangle, we notice that we still have leading spaces, but the difference is the stars, instead of the previous way we did where the stars were changing in numbers which are odd, like 1 3 5 7, here we have 1 2 3 4. If you're confused what I mean by the other video, please just check our other videos on printing full triangles. Now, since our stars are changing by incrementing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are just going to simply print our stars, but the trick comes when by this space we are going to put just after our stars. That does all the magic, guys. I mean, it just arranges the triangle. So now let's do it. So this our leading spaces were printed. So the difference here now is that in our previous videos where we're printing the right angle triangle, I told you that when we want to print a right angle triangle, since if the number of stars varies directly, like if the number of stars, that's j, varies according to the number of rows, that is I, all we need to do is to come here and it will say so long as j is less than equals to I, because when I here will be 1, j2 will be 1. As we see, when I will be 2, j2 will be 2. So when we're on row 1, we'll have 1 star. When we're on row 2, we'll have 2 stars. When we're on row 3, we'll have 3 stars, and so on and so forth. Now, placing the space here is what does the magic, as I earlier said. So let's run this and see what we get. Yeah, so after running this, we have our clean triangle. Let's get into the Christmas tree without wasting a lot of time. So applying triangles, Christmas tree. This Christmas tree is just 4 triangles stacked on one on another. The value is 4 because 4 is the height of the tree. Notice this height of the tree was, in this particular code, the height of the tree was entered by the user. But in this case, we are just going to initialize the height and the width to 4, not to waste time. So we have 4 triangles stacked on top of one another. And we have the tree stand, which is a square that we initially saw how to print the pattern. So our first triangle has a base of 4. So this base is actually the width of the tree. Okay, let's go here. So notice the changes in the apices. So the apice is the first star at the top of the triangle. In this case, we have 1. The next triangle we have 3. The next we have 5. The next we have 7. You notice that this is an odd number pattern, and this we earlier saw in our previous videos. This odd number pattern, this another way we are going to be printing this odd number pattern, these odd number changes, which we are going to see when we begin coding. Now let's notice changes in the bases too. In the bases, we notice that we have the first triangle, which base is the real width, like the initial width, which is 4. And then it changes to 6, and then it changes to 8. So these changes, we notice that it's an even number pattern starting with the width from 4, which is our initial width. So we're also going to see how we'll be causing these changes in these numbers when we'll be coding. From here, we'll get to applying triangles now in the leading spaces. So the leading spaces here are a little complicated, but notice that we will need to find the max number of spaces, which will be this first space here. That will be the max number of spaces. And to have this max number of spaces, we are just going to take the width times the height. Now, why are we taking the width times the height? This max number of spaces, we want our triangle to be as far as possible from these corners. So we need a very large number. So the easiest way to begin the formula, we are going to use the width times the height, which will give us the maximum number of spaces as 16. Since the spaces are decrementing, we'll still use our similar formula that we've been using before, which is n minus I. And remember from the previous videos, I said n is either the number of rows, or n is the size, or n is the maximum spaces. So in this case, our n is going to be the maximum space, and then our I, as I previously said, is always the variable that is in the loop, so that as I is changing, we are going to have the calculations made and the number of spaces changing too. So let's now see how the structure of the program goes. So we're going to have one loop for the whole tree, that is the height, which will be printing this first triangle, second triangle, third triangle, and fourth triangle. And then we're going to have a loop for the leading spaces, which will be printing these leading spaces here. And then we're going to have a loop for stars. This loop is going to be printing these stars one by one. Another loop for the tree stand. So this loop for the tree stand will be just the loop for this final square down here, which we are going to be printing the same using the same principle that we earlier saw. Now, another important concept is the leading spaces for the tree stand is calculated by subtracting the base of the last triangle. So the base of the last triangle is not really this base like this, because here we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, but instead we're going to have 12, because in the structure of our program we're going to be incrementing at the end of the program, like at the end of the loop. So since at the end of the loop we are going to increment more, which will beginning from the initial part of the loop is not going to print the triangle again due to the condition that we placed in the for loop. We are going to have 12 here instead of 10. I'll explain this clear when we'll be coding. So dividing this by 4 is simply because when you want to get midway something, you divide by 2, right? So now dividing by 4, we're just going to have this quarter, this part here where the tree stand is going to begin. And then after doing this, we're going to subtract this from the max number of spaces. This subtraction from the max number of spaces, because we can see that this max number of spaces falls straight at the center. So dividing it by 4 and subtracting will make it to 4 just at this portion where we want it to fall. And then we also have our changing variables. Here we are going to have 2 changing variables. The changing variables are going to be the width of the tree, that is the real width, and we're going to have the apices, which we are going to use a variable called top. Now let's get into the video of the coding part 1. So I'm going to make this a little bigger. Yeah, let's do this. So I just want to remove all this because they will not really serve. So now let's begin. Let's follow this structure. So firstly, we have our width W, which was 4, and our height, which was 4. Let me go to the first slide so that we can see this going down clearly. Right. Now our looping variables, I'll prefer let's use width and height instead of using I and J so that you don't get confused. So here we'll have width and here we'll also have height. Right. Now going to this part, we'll have to get the apex, and I said the apex, we're going to use a variable called top, and this top will initially set it to 1. Why are we setting it to 1? Because the apex of the first triangle, that's the number of stars of the first triangle at the top, is 1. After doing this, we will need our number of spaces, and I said our number of spaces, we're going to get them by multiplying the width times the height. Yes. Now let's get to the loops. So we have the first loop, which brings the height of the tree. So here we'll have for height equals to 1. So long as height is less than or equals to our real height h, we increment height. Now inside the height loop, we need the loop for printing the rows of individual triangles. So inside this height loop, we'll have for width, this width equals to 1, so long as width is less than or equals to our real width, which is 4. So we are going to increment this width Still inside this loop, we are going to print now our spaces, but before that we'll have to declare the variables for the spaces and the variables for the star. Let me just create some space here. So here we'll have for our space equals to 1, space less than equals to number of spaces, which is n, right, minus I, which is a variable which is always in the loop, minus the width, increment our spaces, and then we print our space. Yeah, that's it. Now we're going to go down to the star. Printing the stars, we'll have for our star equals to 1. Star should be less than equals to the width, because I said initially the width will be the size of our triangles, and then star plus. Here we'll print the star, remembering our trick that we saw, putting a space here. So after doing this, we are going to print the next line so that after each iteration we have our stars going to the next line. Yes, so if I run this now, we're going to get this. You see that? So this is a width. Since we have never made changing, we have never made this width to change. We have the base, which is 4, and the apex, which is still 1, because we have not made any changes to it. So it's basically placing these triangles on top of one another. So since the height is 4, we have 4 rows of these triangles, and then we're printing out the triangle stars one after another, one after another. Now let's make the changes. So this is where the changes come in. So since we said our, let me run that code again for clarity. Why is running this? Yes, we have it here. What's happening? Good. Since we have this, sorry guys. Voila. Since we have this, we want our apex to be changing as we saw in the PowerPoint, like from 1 to 3 to 5. So to do this, since our top was initially 1, we'll just want to be adding 2 to each top in such a way that we'll have top plus equals 2, so that when these tops add here, when these 2 adds to this one, we'll have 3 in the next iteration. 3 now we'll add to 2 again, we'll have 5, and so on and so forth. Now for the width, we also want our width to be changing, as we saw in the PowerPoint, by an even number. So initially we said we'll have 4, which is the real width. From here, this width now we'll have to change to 6. From here we'll have to change to 8. So for us to do that, we'll just increment our width by 2 in such a way that since this width here is 4, you add to this 2, we'll have 6. From 6 now, you add again, we'll have 8, and so on and so forth. So that's the trick there, guys. So I'll just close this, and then after doing this, I'll run the code so that we'll see as it progressively builds. Look at this. Nice. From here, we can see that we have 4, right? After 4, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like that, and just like that. Now let's adjust this triangle in such a way that this top should be changing. To do this, guys, We are going to continue by printing the bottom of the tree, that is the tree stand, before we come back to changing that. So here we'll have the height, since the height was our looping variables. So long as our height is less than equals to h, which is t4, because we want our base, like our tree stand, to be coherent with the tree. So we'll make the base stand to be 4, the dimension to be 4 by 4. So here we'll increment the height. So this is just basically printing a square, but the issue with the square now is we need some leading spaces in front of the square. So as we saw in the PowerPoint, this space should be less than. The reason why we're putting less than here is so that, because after dividing, we're going to get a number that is, let's say in this case, our last base is going to be 12. Dividing 12 by 4, we're going to get 3. Now, since the max number of spaces is 16, 16 minus 3, we're going to get 13, right? So this 13 now is going to make the tree look awkward, because since we're dealing with even numbers, if you have an odd number standing in that even number, it's going to make the tree shape in a way. So let me show you guys what that looks like. So here we'll have number of space minus, now we'll have this width divided by 4, and then we're going to increment our space. Yes, printing space here. Yes, and then now let's print the stars for more clarity. So what stars equals to 1, star should be less than equals to the height, which is the h. Since we're dealing with an h by h square, we increment the star, putting the star here. Yes, with the space, but let's not forget to print the next line so that our stars appear line by line. I've always emphasized on this. Yeah, so that's what we have. Now let's run this. So this is what I'm talking about. If you look clearly, you see that this guy is not well positioned, because we're trying to place a space that is odd to a triangle that is even. So to solve this, either we'll put a -1 here, right? Or we'll just say let it be less than, so that it does not, like less than, not inclusive, so that it does not include the 13. So we'll use this, and then running this again, we're going to have our stand placed beautifully directly at the center, like, yes, at the center like this. Now this our tree is having a little problem. The problem comes because after our top was incremented, there was no change in the apixis. So I'm just going to show you how to handle that. So I'm just going to show you guys how to handle that. Now let's observe the code. Observing this code, we see that the reason why our apixis are not changing was because I made an error. I had to put the width equals to top instead. This now will link this top here, so that it should be incrementing here and changing. After doing this, our tree should come out perfectly. Running, code running. I think it should be in the background now with the written. Yes, this is it. Yeah, and that's our Christmas tree, guys. So guys, Thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share to others so that they can also print their Christmas trees as you just did. So I'll see you in the next video.